Hey, welcome to this exciting series. This is our Chiro 101 series, and it's here to help you understand how to get the best out of your care for the first phase of this process. In here, we're going to be talking about some foundational principles, so do not miss this one. In this video, we're going to be talking about pain, inflammation, and tissue healing. We're going to be unpacking exactly what it means, so grab a coffee and don't miss this one. Pain and injury is a normal part of our daily lives. The truth of the matter is that the way our bodies work is that we're constantly breaking the tissue down, we're constantly breaking our bodies down, and our brain and our body is going through this process of recognizing how much repair to do every single night when we sleep. Now, the truth of it is that when we are entering into this acute or even chronic phase of injury, that's when we're producing this inflammation that makes us feel unwell. So the first thing I want to unpack is why we get injured in the first place. The first thing that we want to do is make sure that we understand the mechanics as to why we get injured. So, like I mentioned before, there are two types of injury that we will encounter. The first one will be acute injury. Acute injury happens when we get hit by something. We have a car accident, we have somebody who boulders us over, maybe we get into a fight, or maybe it's something like we fall off a ladder or fall off a building or etc. Now, the truth of it is that happens when the tissue itself is encountering forces that it's not actually designed or conditioned to encounter. That results in a tear of some description and also results in acute damage. Now, the second one is actually what we call chronic injury. Now, chronic injury is a little bit harder to actually identify because it's so subtle and it can actually be something that can happen over a long period of time. Now, examples of this would be things like repetitive strain injuries. It would be things like poor posture. It would be things like doing things just slightly biomechanically incorrectly that over time starts to overwhelm the tissue. Now, there can also be another important component, and particularly when you're seeing a chiropractor, we're talking about spinal components here. Now, if we take the chronic part, this makes a lot more sense in the context of what we're talking about here. Now, when we think about your spinal mechanics here, we want posture to be at its optimal. Now, what posture is posture is the ability for us to hold our body upright in space. Now, there's a particular shape that we're after with posture that lends itself to having the most optimal shape. When we look at you from the back to the front, we want your posture to be straight. We want your ears, your shoulders, your shoulder blades, and your hips to be level. That means that the left and the right side of our bodies, and particularly with our pelvis and where our feet lay on the ground, actually is a solid foundation, and the rest of the spine is getting the right amount of information to hold everything in a balanced state. When we look at you from the side, we actually don't want you to be straight. We want you to have three flowing curves. The neck curve actually goes in, the mid back comes out, and the lower back actually comes back in again. Now, why is it designed that way? Well, it's actually designed that way because of a very important engineering concept, and that is that these curves create structural rigidity. What it does is it builds flexibility back into the structure, but it also builds integrity of the structure itself to stay nice and strong. It means that force is one, allocated evenly across the body, and two, it makes the joints easier to function without them actually getting injured in any one particular part. So what I mean by that is this, is that when our neck curve has this nice reverse curve, when we are bouncing up and down, our head is pushing onto our spine and to the base of our neck over here, and it basically compresses and it bounces back, just like a spring that has an elastic nature to it. And the same thing then happens with the rest of our spine. So you get this nice bounce. Now, what would happen if that changed? Well, you can imagine that the integrity of the structure is not going to be where it should be, and also the bounce is not going to happen the way it should as well. And this is commonly the reason why we get injured, and also one of the reasons that we develop these spinal injuries that become worse with time. So, posture itself is such an important component, so much so that we did a study and we showed that people who develop chronic lower back pain as a result of poor posture actually had issues with holding their body upright, holding their posture upright, as well as having the ability to have awareness for how their body moves. Now, that's a really important thing because people who have this poor posture response actually is more likely to overwhelm the ligaments, overwhelm the joints, and overwhelm the muscles. And that's often the reason why we develop these spinal problems, we develop these recurrent issues, and more importantly, why we keep falling back into this pain and inflammation model. So that is one of the reasons why we get injured. One, because acute injury, or two, because of repetitive strains and poor postures. So what actually happens when we go through this injury phase? Is inflammation a good thing? Is inflammation a bad thing? How does your body heal? Well, so important. Inflammation, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? We like to think inflammation is a bad thing because of the pain that's associated with it. But truth of it is that inflammation is a good thing. It's a normal process, it happens, and what it more importantly does is it actually stimulates the process of tissue repair. And this is how it works. We have injury that happens, and we know that injury can happen from an acute point or it can happen from a chronic point. From there, you will have this process of inflammation, but inflammation will have a few different responses to it. One, it will reduce the range of motion. Two, it will increase redness. It will increase swelling, and it will also increase pain. Now, why do we have pain? Pain is a response to our bodies to tell us to slow down. Because after all, we can't repair something if the structure keeps moving excessively. It's like trying to lay concrete down on a driveway when there's an earthquake going on. Doesn't really work. That's why we have pain. Now, the inflammation itself will result in repair, but it does so through this thing called adhesive tissue. And what adhesive tissue is? It's collagen. It's all this stuff that actually helps to repair the tissue that it almost looks like there was never an injury in the first place. And this process here happens seamlessly. It happens all the time. It happens in varying degrees, but it also happens when we don't actually have pain. And this is where the little bit of the trick is, because the pain response in our bodies can actually be there independent of whether we're injured or not. And that's the little bit of the confusing part, but this is how it basically works. Because pain itself is a response from the brain. The pain we need to look at as an indicator or a communication to our bodies and our brains to say, hey, you need to slow down, or no, I've got this. I could repair this while you're continuing your normal process. And this is how it basically works. When we first get injured, our pain is at its highest. It tends to be over here, but it will reduce down because inflammation naturally reduces down with time. Now, why is this the case? Because our bodies are pretty clever. It naturally heals, it regulates, and it doesn't need to be told how to do it. It just needs to be given the opportunity to do it, right? Now, when that happens there, and the reason why it happens is because the stability in the area is actually improving and increasing. Now, this is what we want to pay attention to. We want to pay attention to how quickly can we get the stability back? How quickly can we help this process sort of move forward so that we can ultimately result in less inflammation, less pain, and more importantly, more tissue repair, right? Now, the process is this, is that the first phase of the inflammation process is what we call the acute phase. This is when pain's at its highest and when it's the most annoying. It's the sharpest amount of pain we will receive. And this here will last anywhere from 2 to 3 days. Then we move to what we call the repair phase. And the repair phase here is when we do the most amount of work. This can last anywhere from 1 to 6 weeks. And the pain here can actually be dull and achy, and it can have varying degrees. But as we move up through this process here, we will notice that the pain gets less and less consistent and becomes more and more spaced out. It becomes less and less intense and becomes less intense, less intense over time, right? And so what we want to be looking for is this crossover point here. Now, this crossover point here is the process by which we go into what we call the remodeling phase. Now, the remodeling phase of a year can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months to achieve. Now, what is the remodeling phase? The remodeling phase is basically the equivalent of us repairing a hole in the sanding and painting phase here. This is the part of the process which is the one that we get the most amount of function from. We don't generally feel pain in this process. We generally feel that it's stiff, but there's not really any pain. And even if we do have pain, the pain will generally be very, very mild. So while we're talking about pain, let's talk about the intensities. In the first phase here, we're generally going to be seeing our pain intensity between 8 to 10 out of 10. As we move into the repair phase, we will see the pain drop anywhere from a 1 to 2 to a 8 out of 10. And then the last phase generally is about a 0 to 1 out to 2 out of 10. So that's what we're expecting to see here. That's what the pain will feel like. And more importantly, what the process as we take you through this first phase of care will look like. Often, we're moving through this repair phase. This is the most important phase to help you get to a place where you're, 1, structurally stable, but 2, more importantly, feeling better. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. How do chiropractic adjustments help in this whole process? Well, the first thing is that the chiropractic adjustments actually improve the joint mobility to increase the blood flow. So remember what I said before, the blood flow and the tissue that is being transported by that blood flow to the area that's injured needs to be really high. And your adjustments will help to increase that even further. It helps to pump a whole bunch of repair tissue to that area. And that's why we want to adjust you in this injury period. The second thing it actually does is by adjusting you, it increases the ability for the brain to recognize how to control that area, stabilize it, and keep it strong while it's healing. Because the worst thing that we want to have happened is it gets re-injured while we're repairing this really great solid tissue along the way. It's almost like we've worked hard to lay that driveway down. We know that it's not going to get re-injured. We know that it's not going to be messy. And then all of a sudden somebody just walks through that driveway, right? That's one of the reasons why we have to adjust you through this pain period, because it helps your brain stabilize that area and make sure, like I said, that it doesn't get re-injured. Now, the last one is that while we're adjusting you, it naturally blocks pain. Now, how does this actually work? Well, when we're in pain, there's a particular imbalance that exists that happens naturally for a reason, but it happens to trigger off the pain response. And what this basically means, it means that the area is triggering off pain signals and the brain is going, pain, let's create the response of pain and the perception of pain. Now, when we adjust you, what it actually does is it brings back to balance those pain and sensation nerves so that naturally there's a really nice clarity that exists for that area. And that's how we naturally find that we get pain relief that exists with your adjustments. This is why it's so important in this period of time that we're adjusting you to the schedule that we are, that each of these adjustments are building on each other. Not only is it increasing the blood flow, making sure that it stays stable, but also is naturally blocking pain, which is ultimately the first goal that we're after with you. So always remember that keep your adjustments through this phase because you will get your fastest results. Now, there's one more thing. We looked at those time perspectives as explained to you. Remember, 2 to 3 days for the first acute episode, 1 to 6 weeks for the repair phase, and 6 to 6 months for the remodeling phase. Now, what we know is that if we go through this adjustment phase and we're adjusting you through this period, it will actually speed those up. It will speed those time periods up. So our ultimate goal is to get you right till the end of it in 6 weeks rather than 6 months. So that's fundamentally one of the last important reasons why we want to adjust you in this time. So how do we speed up your results? How do we speed this whole process up? First one is to stick to the plan of adjustments and the frequency that we have you on. The reason why is because your adjustments will be the single most effective strategy so that we can help you, 1, repair injury really quickly, and 2, to help stabilize that area so that the whole process can heal at a much more effective and much faster rate. Now, the second one is to stick to your exercise plan. Mobility is fundamental to the goal that we're after. Now, one of the challenges that we have is that when we have poor posture, when we have an injury process happening, that joint naturally is going to want to be protected by the body. Now, we need a decent amount of movement into the area, but we don't need too much. It needs to be in a controlled environment. That's why your exercise plan is in place right now. We give you exercises that are for your brain, so that we have your brain having an awareness of the surroundings so that it can actually help keep your posture upright. And the second one is the actual mobility so that we can start breaking down some of the tight tissue that your muscles have developed over time. So stick to the mobility exercise plan that we've given you. The third one is to eat the right things. Now, we want to reduce inflammation, foods in your body, because an inflammatory environment unfortunately slows down your repair time. So having a reduced inflammation diet helps to improve your healing time. So this looks like changing your oils from things that are like canola oils or vegetable-based oils or rice bran oils down to things that are like olive oil or even things using like ghee and coconut oil. Obviously, we want to make sure that we keep an eye on the calories. So it doesn't mean you eat copious amounts of this. It means that you just switch out the types of oils that you're having. Now, the 2 other things that reduces inflammation is 1, reducing back your sugar, which all of us, I think, are guilty of. And the second thing is reducing back the things that inflame our gut, which is unfortunately wheat and dairy. So if you can reduce those things, that will help significantly with helping speed this whole process up so your tissue can repair much more effectively. And the last one is to supplement the right things. You know, we'd love to think that our diets are foolproof and it's bulletproof. But the truth of the matter is that we're all busy and we'll all have time-poor lifestyles that unfortunately doesn't lend itself to a really balanced diet. And this is when supplements can actually come into it. The supplements that would be really effective in the first phase of your care would be things like magnesium. Magnesium helps to fuel the body, reduce muscle stiffness, and is an actual essential element to not only to produce stress hormones and help support your body when it's under stress, but also to help reduce the amount of muscle tightness we have in your body. The other things that would be important would be collagen. Collagen is a great supplement that we can find in our naturally occurring foods like bone broth and other types of tendon-rich foods like lamb shanks, for instance. But a collagen supplement could be a really great adjunct to our diet to make sure that we've got the building blocks for repair. And the last one would be curcumin or turmeric. Now, turmeric we can have naturally in our diet. We can buy some natural turmeric powder and use that and cook a lot more with that. Now, unfortunately, the problem with turmeric is that the molecule is really, really big, which means that it makes it hard to absorb. That's why having something like a curcumin supplement could be really helpful when you are in the acute phase. The magnesium and the collagen works really well when you're in the repair phase. So I hope that made a little bit of sense, and I hope that helped to sort of bring everything back into clarity for you. That's how we speed this whole process up. So it's brought us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for paying attention to it. And I hope it's brought, again, clarity to how we're going to be able to get you out of pain, but also how this pain process works. So take care.